Hey guys, it is Sam here with Northern Card Gaming. Today we're going to be taking a look at the standard format and what we believe are the top 10 decks in the standard format right now. We had a little discussion with this amongst the team, so I'm fairly confident that this is kind of our general view of Team NTG at the moment. I put the initial list together looking at recent results, obviously at Santa Clara Regionals, and at the Sao Paulo regionals and the regionals over in Sydney over the past few weeks, and also looking at a few cup results as well, obviously on Verbank and Hayfonte and things like that. So hopefully this is a fairly good list, and we've included all the decks that you would agree are up there. Maybe our order's not quite right though, but that is for you to decide. So we'll start off with the first deck on the list, which is in at number 10, Quagsire Naganadel. So this deck obviously saw quite a lot of play in the team up format, being a single prize attacking deck, mainly focusing on the Quagsire and Naganadel lines, with the Onyx thrown in there to hit the fighting weaknesses that we need. So we have really good type coverage with this deck, as just mentioned, and it's also a fairly straightforward deck to play. We flood our board with energy using Naganadel's, Aquapatches and things like that to get all the energy back on board that gets discarded, and then we try and keep them on board with things like the Wishful Baton cards. Obviously it's multiple stage ones, so setting up multiple lines of different cards can be quite tricky, can potentially lead to clunky decks, clunky draws, and we can really struggle sometimes just to get those cards consistently out, especially if we lose critical stage ones like Quagsire. Sometimes we may not be able to respond with a return of Quagsire next turn. And then also at the moment this deck is just getting tripped up a little bit by tool removal and things being quite high. Field Blower and Faber are beginning to see a little bit of play. Field Blower in a lot of decks, Zoroark decks, things like that, to get rid of power plants, and also just because there's a lot of the Shedninja stall decks running around at the moment, so people are beginning to want to counter those. And also we have the new Mew with Bench Barrier that released with Unbroken Bonds, which can take away our one of our win conditions with the Wailord Magikarp GX attack, that sweeps the board with 100 damage on all the bench. So we've just got to be aware of that being played in a few more decks at the moment. Things like Pikarom, things like Reshiram&Charizard are also being to see those being teched in a little bit more. So we've just got to be aware of those kind of cards being around a little bit more. In at number 9, we've got Ultra Necrozma. Now Carl was quite unhappy because I wasn't sure this was at number 9, but I put it at 10 originally. Obviously Carl Blake is a big fan of this deck and reckons it deserves a higher slot. I refuse to put it higher than 9 for now. It's not really had a big showing in the last couple of weeks since we had the Unbroken Bond set become legal, but it's still up there. It is still a big GX Pokemon that can hit big numbers, take down those big tag team GXs like Reshiram and Pikarom, and obviously with the Malamars we also have our own inbuilt energy acceleration, which at the moment with things like Welder and Kiawe being big cards in the fire decks, it's good to have our own response with our own energy acceleration mechanic as well. Obviously the cons are similar to what they've always have been with this deck. It's very expensive attack costs. Need 3 or 4 psychic energy on the Ultra Necrozmas to start raining in those big tag team GXs. And we can also be a bit clunky in the setup if we don't get energies in the bin. We can't get the Malamars on board and start recycling those energies. It can be a little bit slow. So we just need to be able to get off. But when the deck pops off, guys, it really does, and I'm sure plenty of people know that by now that have been around the game for a while. When the deck fires, it really does. I know it's a big deck for players in the UK. A lot of players have stuck with it for a long time. People like Carl, and also like Adam Hawkins and Ryan Morehouse, I know, has played it quite a little bit as well. So it has its fans. So it's up here at number 9. In number 8, we've got Baby Blacephalon. I was really disappointed with this deck, to be honest. I hoped it was going to be a lot better. It had a really good showing in Japan for a little while, and I just thought it looked really strong when it first came out. It's not to say it's not strong, because it is. We have a huge damage cap. We have a really high damage cap. which is basically just as many energies you can get into your hand is the only cap on the damage that we can put out. So we can be hitting sort of the 250, 300 damage that we need to rein in some of the tag teams reasonably quickly, reasonably easily. And it's also a single prize focused deck. I've been playing this as a quad build at the moment, just with the 4 Blacephalon cards as the attackers. But I've also seen things like Turtonator and Jirachis and stuff thrown in there as well, just to try and give us a different option. Obviously at the moment, as we said with the Quagsire deck, there's a lot of tool removal beginning to appear. We want to chain our energies in order to keep attacking, so Wishful Baton plays a big part in that. If we lose those to field blowers and stuff, it can really sort of hit us and we have to sort of go back into welder turns. But then we need the energy in hand to be able to welder, and then it might mean we don't have the energy in hand to hit the big numbers for the attack. We also have a little bit of a lack of a draw engine, which is where the Jirachi comes in. I know Joe Bernard has been a big fan of the Jirachi build, so that has been something I've tested a little bit, just to try and give you a bit more of an engine. But then obviously you lose the greens exploration with that, because you've then got the abilities in play. And then, as always with any deck like this, there is a risk of benching out any quad build. There's always that risk if you can't get those Blacephalons out onto the board. Things like Pikachu and Zekrom with their GX attack, or just any deck that's going to spread damage around can start forcing us into bench out territory. But again, I've put it at number 8. I do think it'll be strong in cups. I do think it'll win some cups. I'm not sure whether it'll win a regional, but it might be around it. I'm sure it'll be around it. The NAIC that's coming up fairly soon. So number 8 at the moment for that deck, maybe with potential to rise up the ranks. In at number 7, we've got the Weezing Spread deck. Another deck I've been a really big fan of since it came out. I've just started sort of testing it this last week too, but I've always been quite interested with this detention gas ability that's kind of a throwback to the old Flygun card. There's lots of ways to spread the damage with this. Obviously you've got Flying Flips if you need it, you've got the Weezings, you've got things, you've got the Shrine of Punishments, things like that. So we can start spreading damage in a number of ways. We have a number of tech attackers, a couple that I've thrown up there, Larvitar and the Frost Rotom. Just obviously the Larvitar countering things like Pikarom and Zoroark, the Frost Rotom's in there to counter the big Reshiram&Charizards, just hitting for the weakness there as well. And again, it's a single prize deck, so we can sort of keep up with these big tag teams, especially with the spread deck. They're going to take a few knockouts early on. They're going to whittle us down on our prizes, and then we come in and we try and take all their prizes in one turn, maybe 2 turns. It can be clunky during the setup. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts. Keeping 2 Weezing in play is kind of the big thing with this deck. Being able to recycle them with rescue stretchers when they get knocked out and get them back onto the board is super important. Spread can be played around, particularly the new Mew, as we've already mentioned, can stop us hitting bench damage, which can then stop the spread there. But it is relatively strong deck at the moment. It had a few placings at Santa Clara Regionals and a few cups of cup placings. So I think it will be a deck that a lot of people are going to play around with, and it will certainly show up from time to time, so you've got to be prepared for it. The next one is at number 6. We've got the Zoroark Persian with water techs, the 2 in particular, Slowking and Dugong. Zoroark is always going to be with that card that is just coming back and back. It's got this trade ability that we all know, and I imagine until it rotates, unless we see it in the Hidden Fates expansion, I think until it rotates in August, we are just going to keep seeing Zoroark decks of some form or another. A new partner for it though at the moment appears to be Persian GX with this Catwalk ability. Gives us a big comeback potential with the ability that lets us search for 2 cards. So we can get that sort of Dugong evolution and then the triple acceleration energy, or we can get the choice band that we need, or whatever, just to take the knockouts. And I think that's a really strong ability. Obviously we've got the trades to dig through our deck anyway, but being able to grab the exact 2 cards we need is just crucial. and then it saves us having to play Mallow. It saves us having to have things like the like Cargos on the bench to get the cards we need. And then we also got a strong attack in the Vengeance attack as well, which can soon rack up the numbers, especially sort of mid to late game. We can hit big numbers with that attack as well. We're up to 190 before modifiers, which is just really strong. We can start raining in a few, again, start hitting some big GXs and tag teams for some significant damage. We are very ability reliant. Power Plant in particular is a big enemy of this card. I've been playing around with Marshadow counts, the new Unbroken Bonds Marshadow in this deck. Essentially that is just a nest ball into removal of power plants and things like that. But also field blower counts are quite high. I think most Zoroark decks now are running 2 field blower just to get rid of those. I have put on here as well that it's kind of a low HP GX heavy focus deck. What I mean by that is this 210 HP is no longer that high. A lot of decks have been playing bodybuilding dumbbells just to add that extra little bit of HP, but Pikarom obviously hits 200 damage with the GX attack anyway. With choice band and things or electric powers, that becomes 230, and then the Charizard is hitting the big numbers as well, just with the GX attack and with the main attack. So it's just one of those decks where you just got to be really careful of how many GXs you've got in play, and be aware that some of the tag teams can hit those numbers now. The next deck on the list at number 5, we've got the Shedninja Control deck. So obviously this appeared at the EUIC in Berlin, in a slightly different form to what it is now, but still playing this core of Oranguru with the Zeb Strikers and the Shedninja, just to sort of prize deny your opponent. So they're taking knockouts, wasting their resources to take those knockouts, but they're not getting any prizes for it because of the Shedninja cards. We want to manipulate the opponent quite a lot. We play the Trumbeaks, and we also play the new Chip Ice Axe, just to kind of grinch away all their Guzmas, and then we can prevent them taking knockouts that way. We also, as you can see there, got that sneaky little Mew from the Unbroken Bonds, the bench barrier, just to stop the damage spread so that we can keep those Shedninjas rolling, because obviously they do have to evolve from the Nincada, so we don't want to lose the Nincadas before we've had a chance to evolve them up. It's a fairly solitaire deck. I've put that as a pro, but obviously depending on which side of the fence you sit, that could also be a con. You kind of play your turn out with rinse through all your deck with the Zeb Strikers and with the sprint ability, play your turn out, give your opponent their turn, and then we're kind of back into the rinse through your deck with Zeb Striker, resource management, back to your opponent. So it's a fairly solitaire deck. You kind of do everything on your turn, let your opponent do their thing, and then you just kind of go back out there to prevent them taking prizes again. So you just keep in recycling the Shedninjas at that point, and just preventing your opponent from taking all 6 of their prizes, and eventually you can win the game because you have this infinite cycle with the Orangurus, and eventually they're going to deck out and they're going to run out of their resources. Tool removal, as we've already said with a number of decks, tool removal is definitely on the rise. Field blowers and fabbers are getting played more and more. Field blower in particular gets rid of those Shedninjas, and then we're struggling. Once they start getting rid of the Shedninjas and can start taking prizes, that's where this deck really begins to struggle. And I think the popularity of this deck, particularly over in America, is causing those field blower accounts and things to rise, as people really want to just not lose to a deck like this. I know Jimmy Pendarvis and Azul both made top 8 at Santa Clara Regionals with this deck, so it's definitely still a big contender in the format, so it's just one to be aware of. The next one up at number 4, a bit of a drop off since the team up meta. We've got this Pikachu and Zekrom deck. Obviously, we've seen a more hybrid build of this deck appearing more and more recently, with the Zapdos in there as well. Gustavo Wada performing quite well with this deck as a hybrid build with multiple Zapdos counts, sometimes up to 3. So we become a bit of a hybrid between, we're a Pikachu and Zekrom big tag team 3 prize deck, but we're also a Zapdos single prize deck when we need to be. So it kind of fits the best of both worlds. We've got the inbuilt energy acceleration with full blitz. Again, like we said previously, there's a lot of welder and things running around, so keeping up with those fire decks is really important. And it really does have the comeback potential with things like Tapu Koko GX. We can really put pressure on Reshiram&Charizards once they've got a lot of the energies on board. We can put pressure on with that GX attack instead of going down the Tag Bolt GX route. So just a really strong deck with versatile options that are available to us. We are very reliant on our abilities and on hitting combos, so things like Power Plant that we've mentioned previously can really harm this deck. Also things like Mew from Unbroken Bonds that stops us getting that Tag Bolt GX off. That can cause problems as well. And just generally, this deck has been around a while now, so people have learned to tech against it and learned to throw in their Buzzwalls into their sort of decks that play Rainbow Energies and things like that, or Beast Energies, and just have options to be able to take down these big Pikachu and Zekrom Tag Team GX cards. In at number 3, well up from the team up meta, in my opinion, is this wall stall kind of deck. So team up, we kind of saw the Regigigas Hooper build a little bit more. Now we've kind of had this Lucario Melmetal GX come out, and it kind of expands the way we play the deck a little bit. It kind of changes the way we play the deck a little bit. Obviously it's got the Full Metal Wall GX attack for a colourless energy, where we're taking 30 less damage from opponents' attacks, all our metal Pokemon. So that makes our Lucario Melmetals just effectively a 290 HP if they're attempting to one-shot us, and then we can play things like Frying Pan, just to prevent that fire weakness as well, which is super important because obviously we've already discussed the prevalence of fire in the meta right now. The idea is we just tank those big hits with the Lucario Melmetal. We keep him healthy, keep him healed. But then we've also got the other options of things like Hooper, which I still think has a place in this deck. Whether Regigigas still has that place, I'm not too sure, but Hooper certainly still has the place. And I've also put quite prevalently on here is that Vileplume with the disgusting pollen from the Burning Shadows expansion, I think it was. And basically it means our opponent's basic Pokemon can't attack. So we shut off the Pika Roms, we shut off the Reshizards, and we force those decks to play counters. We force them to play Flareon GX, we force them to play Jolteon GX, we force them to play Arcanine, things like that to play around. Or we force them to throw in a copy or two of Secret Hood, Stealthy Hood, into their deck just to get around that disgusting pollen ability. But that means they're taking for this matchup, and maybe we don't have as much success in the others. A couple of cards I've also put in on this particular slide, whether they see as much play as others like the Vileplume and the Hooper, is the Unknown Hand. Obviously that gives us an extra win condition, and also Girafarig with the Get Lost attack that can just throw opponent's resources into the Lost Zone. Also gives us a slightly different win condition against decks that might prefer their fire energies in the bin, their basic energies in the bin or anything like that. Didn't mean to say fire, but things like Malamar that wants their psychic energies in the bin, we can sort of get rid of them and we can sort of spoil their party a little bit, we can spoil their resources. But same with other decks as well. Things like against the other variant of stall that we've talked about, the Orangaroo Shedninja, we can start trying to get rid of Shedninjas and other valuable resources out of their discard pile, throw them in the Lost Zone, and just force those decks to find other ways to beat us. In at number 2, this big Reshiram&Charizard deck that I've talked about a lot so far, even when talking about the other archetypes. Particularly, my particular favourite build at the moment is the Zoroark build, but I do think the Volcanion build, the Quad Volcanion Greens Exploration build, is also pretty strong. Obviously Kian Armini, I believe his name is, won the Santa Clara Regionals with it, so it's certainly no poor deck, the Volcanion build. However, Pablo Meza, Tablemon, he also won the Sao Paulo Regionals with the Jirachi build, so Take your pick which one you prefer. I think they're both pretty strong. Personally, I just really like Jirachi as a card, and I think that card makes any deck pretty solid. So that's, for me, it's that one. Obviously, the idea, we just get the fire energies onto Reshiram as quickly as we can, and we start hitting with the big flare strikes, double blaze GX attacks, taking out all their threats as quickly as possible, just by hitting those big numbers. We have our own inbuilt energy acceleration with the Kiawis, with the welders, which makes this deck just super quick as well. Puts us out of range of some of the slower decks before they even get a chance to set up. But we are very GX heavy, we're very tag team GX heavy. This Reshiram is the main attacker. Reasonably expensive attack costs, as all fire decks tend to be. And it's just, depending on what you play, it's kind of a less consistent build. We don't have necessarily inbuilt draw support and things like that. I know the Salazzle build got a bit of hype before the set actually released, but I think that's kind of dropped off the radar a little bit, and people are preferring to play the Jirachi and the Volcanion builds, as I've already previously discussed. And then finally, in at number 1, I think this is currently the best deck in format. I think it was for a lot of the team-up meta. But Zapdos is just that really strong card with that Thunderous Assault. It's a single prize, low-cost attacker, and it's just very, very versatile. Obviously now, our Ultra Beast army has grown a little bit. We've got the Kartanas and the Pheromosa and Buzzwoles. They just give us different options with the Ultra Beast swing turns, and it also means we just hit that extra weakness of being able to hit grass weakness when we need to, particularly against things like Quagsire. So we can kind of take those decks down a little bit easier as well. It also changes the numbers a little bit because we've got the Jet Punch and we've got the Kartana attack that hits for 130, I think it is, on the big turn, similar to the Sledgehammer turn, but works on your own prizes cards. So we've just got a little bit of change of numbers and things as well on with those techs. The deck is very Jirachi reliant, so things like Muck still hurt the deck. It's been seeing a little bit less play recently, which I think is why I'm confident this deck is at the top. People have started dropping the Muck lines from their decks, but it's also very switch reliant. We play a number of sort of switch cards, Escape Rope, Switch itself, and skateboards, just to kind of bounce those cards around, bounce the Pokemon around. Being able to get Zapdos active with a number of modifiers also means we can chase down the big tag team GXs that maybe look to one-shot us and we have to two-shot them, but we win on the prize race because we're taking 3, they're taking 2. So yeah, I still think this deck is very much the strongest in format. Speaking to the guys at NCG, I think we kind of all agree with that as well. So yeah, quite confident this is at the top. It didn't win. Obviously, Reshiram has won the 2 regionals in Sao Paulo and Santa Clara, but it did have 4 of the top 8 spots, including the top spot over at the Sydney regionals. And I think it'll just, around cups and particularly NIIC, I think it'll be a big threat in the format. So I think it's certainly worth keeping an eye on this one. And I think it does just hit those numbers and chase those big GXs down well enough to deserve this top spot. So that's it. That's our top 10 decking standard. As I said before, you might agree, you might disagree, you might think we've missed one out. You may think our order needs changing around. The Zapdos and Reshiram, I think, will be quite controversial, whether that's top or bottom. I also think we've put Stall fairly high, which I think we've got to respect Stall at the moment. And I don't think people do respect Stall, so I think that'll maybe cause a few headaches for people. People disagree with me on that one. But that is how we are at the moment. That is how we feel kind of the top 10 decks are looking. As always, thanks for all our sponsors that make all these things possible, make our team work. Ultimate Guard, Card Market, Total Cards, Ink Gaming, and our new friends over at Okie Dokie Dice, who have just recently come on board. Big thank you to those guys because they keep us rolling with things like this. We'll be back with our Stuck for a Cup play this week. We've taken a little break from that. Obviously, we had a run of EUIC and Bristol regionals, things like that, and then just kind of getting settled in this new format. But we will be back with this week, so keep an eye on the Facebook page later on this week, because that will be making a new appearance. But thank you very much for your time, guys. Thank you for spending time listening to me talk on about these decks, and we'll see you all very soon, I'm sure. Thanks, goodbye.